You started a bookstore in Coral Gables after having been a teacher, right? And you're from Miami Beach. So why and how did that happen first before we get in? Because I feel like film and the books, it's all branches of the same tree to a certain degree.
It is. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I will try to impart as much information as I've learned over the course of doing this. I need to, just get out there from the beginning. I'm truly a bookseller, and I come to film. I don't hold myself out to be an expert in terms of what I'm doing, but think of me as someone who's just been a little like Alice in Wonderland, learning as I've filtered myself through this business that many of you have been studying and have been deeply involved in for so many years. It started, I've always had a love of film. I mean, from the time I can remember, I grew up on Miami Beach in a very analog world. It was before phones, before any of that. Film and books and music were the three things that consumed me as a kid growing up. On Miami Beach, it's hard to imagine, but on Lincoln Road itself, there were 4 movie theaters on Lincoln Road itself. And if you think of all of South Beach, there were probably 6 or 7 movie theaters. So at any given time, the amount of different kinds of films we could see growing up was amazing. In fact, going all the way down to my past, one of the earliest films I remember was when my parents, I don't know what they were thinking, in those days, there were, back near where Palmetto area is, there were drive-in theaters, and my parents used to take us kids. I'm the eldest of 4, to this drive-in down there, and the one that sticks out that scared the hell out of me. They took me when I was 6 years old to see Psycho in a drive-in movie theater. And I mean, that made an imprint on me very, very early. Then on Lincoln Road, when I was a kid, every Saturday afternoon, kind of like what we do here, every Saturday afternoon, there'd be a movie club thing that your parents would drop you off at. And then they would have an intermission with one of those like horse races going on. If you had the number, you got a free popcorn. So the magic of film. And early, I remember things like, Time Machine. I saw It's a Mad, Mad World, which I loved. The film became just part of what I did, just like reading was part of what I did. Listening to music was part of what I did. So it was a very natural love for a kid who was interested in the arts to have film being one of the things they loved. In fact, when I got into high school and the high school newspaper, I became a film critic. Not a very good one, but I remember how cool it was to go to early screenings with adult film critics. I remember seeing.
You remember what you reviewed?
Yeah. I remember reviewing The Go-Between. I don't know if you remember that film. It was actually a pretty good film. But then I remember there were all of these like Billy Jack movies that were out then. It was a mixture of really good. I did also see The Wild Bunch, which I loved at that point. But it was and then also as a senior in high school, there was, how many of you know Nat Chediak? I hope a lot of you do. Nat Chediak is really the father of, contemporary film stuff here in Miami. And Nat at the time was a student at the University of Miami. And Nat had a film series going on, and I was a high school kid on Miami Beach, and I would drive out to see what he was doing. And he was doing some really bizarre stuff. He was bringing in like Shock Carter and all of those films that were kind of a little on the edge. Freaks, if you remember that film. So, imagine a time when you couldn't just go to Netflix or anywhere to see them. The only time you could see film was in a movie theater that somebody was presenting. Coconut Grove had something called the Grove Cinema. The Flying Fendelman Brothers had that, and I would go see that. And at those days, I was introduced to Truffaut and Lena Wertmuller and Bergman. And they were revelations to me when I was watching all that stuff. Then I went to college. I went to University of Colorado, and there was a very famous experimental film guy there named Stan Brakhage. I don't know if any of you know him. You know who is. Yeah, he did animation, but he also did these very, very modernist kinds of things where he would use film and overdevelop it and that sort of stuff. Stan Brakhage taught, but I took a film appreciation class, not with him, but someone else. This was in the mid-'70s. French New Wave was really big. A lot of the German guys were big. American stuff, beginning to see things like Taxi Driver and all of that was really big at that time. So this was always an interest of mine. I then started the bookshop. And then what I was seeing really early on, I was seeing books. And I knew that because of books and film were two interests, a lot of film were made from books, lots. And their adaptation was big then. It's bigger now, but it hadn't been really, you didn't see the Reese Witherspoons doing book clubs in order to find out what books were popular so they could option the book. That wasn't happening back then. It was really kind of, well, a director would say, I like this book, or a producer would, and then try to develop it. So that was something that as a bookseller I began to see, and I played that in my mind about what, would this make a good film? Would that make a good film? And it really all came together about 2003 when there was a book that I had seen really, really early. It was called Water for Elephants. Do any of you know that film that was made from that? So that was a book that I saw that nobody knew about. Because we were at a meeting, the publisher gave us early copies. I read it, and finally I said to myself, that would make an amazing film, and I want to make it. But I had no idea how to do any of it. But I did have a sister who was involved in television.
Did you know that Marquitas plantain chips?
Se llaman mariquitas.
I'm sorry, I was told they were pronounced Marquitas.
Mariquitas are making right here in Miami.
And now Marquitas chips have a new avocado oil and sea salt line. Muy rico.
So this is a funny story. So my sister, who was involved in television, had worked up the ranks in TV. She was Fox TV, but her whole world was always television. So the first pitch I made was the head of a studio. I have this incredible book that I think would make a great film. Whoops. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, let me look up some of the, quote, coverage. And she said, well, if it becomes a big book, maybe it would be okay to do. And then she used these words, says, if we do anything, I'll make sure you're attached. I had no idea what that meant either. But she didn't do anything, and somebody else did. So the next time that happened, was about 7 or 8 years later when I was handed a book by a wonderful editor named Susan Camel from Random House, Doubleday Random House. And it was a book by an unknown author, Marianne Schaefer, and she had actually died. And her niece, who had written children's books, named Annie Barrows, finished the book. And I was at a do you know that? You know the book. And so that I was at a meeting at Random House, and as I'm walking out, Susan hands me the galley and says, read this and let me know how we're going to make it a bestseller. I read it on the plane going home, and I said, this is definitely going to be a bestseller, but now I really want to make a movie out of it. So I called my sister again. I said, Marcy, you have to do better this time than you did last time. So there was a friend of hers named Paula Mazer who had been doing films. She cut her teeth. As long as I'd been a bookseller, she'd been a filmmaker. She cut her teeth early on doing a lot of those kind of one-woman or one-man show films. Spalding Gray, she did a lot of work with him. What's her name? Who married Lou Reed? You know what I'm talking about. And she did a film, I Am Superman was her film. Then she did some regular scripted films and did something with Jodie Foster. And so she'd been doing all this. Marcy hooked me up with Paula. Paula loved the book as well. We said, all right, let's partner together on this. I found some money. She then started guiding me as to how this is done. I then found some local money. We optioned the book. We met with the author. We optioned the book. It was I don't know, should I go into detail about optioning, or maybe
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can ask
Yeah,
about that?
I think they would love that.
All right. So the way it works. So I'll tell you the story of this. Bless you. And by telling you this story, it may be really instructive. So once you identify a book you really want, there are two kinds of agents. There's a literary agent who takes care of the book, and then there's a book to film agent who takes care of the rights from the book to film, and they sell it to people like me or others. So we found who the book to film agent was, and then we started a negotiation, and we were able to option the book for $30,000, I think, which gave you an 18-month option. And then you usually, in the agreement, you usually get a second option as well for a set amount. So we optioned it for $30,000. I found some local money to do that, and we optioned it. And Paula's really good at what she does, and she has entree into everybody because she's been doing it for so long. So I hooked up with the right person this time. And Paula knew everyone in LA. And remember, this was 2000, I want to say, I think I wrote it down. It was a while ago. It's instructive as to how long it was, because it'll show you how long it takes sometimes. So Guernsey, we optioned it in 2010, all right? And in 2010, it was before streamers, it was before all those things. So studios were making movies like this, $40 million, $60 million. So I get a call 6 months after we optioned this from Paula that says, you've got to come out to LA immediately. So I get on a plane. This is in 2011, I think. I get on a plane, I go out, and apparently we had a meeting on the Fox lot with Fox 2000. Do any of you know what Fox 2000 doesn't exist anymore? But it was last name was Gabler. I'm forgetting her first name. But we go into this meeting. It was me, Paula, and the head of Fox 2000, and we're talking. Oops, excuse me. We're talking, and Paula and she are talking, and then I'm asking a few naive questions. And they both look at me and they say, should we tell them what just happened? And I say, yeah, it's a good idea. Tell me what just happened. And so they agreed to do the film in the room. They bought it in the room. And so it was all of us. I said, my God, what an easy business this is. Unbelievable. So here I am, my very first book, we optioned it, and Fox 2000 is going to make a $35-40 million film with this. They immediately got someone to adapt it. They paid him like $1.5 million to adapt it. Then they had Kenneth Branagh directing it. Kate Winslet was going to star in it. And we were going to start production in about 6 months. Meanwhile, I'm like, wow, my head is spinning. So what is my role during all this? I'm sure many of you are wondering. So I'm intimately involved, as much as I can be, with every decision that's going on. I mean, I'm not saying no to any decision, but I'm intimately involved in the decision making. So I knew everything that was happening. Paula and I would talk. I'm on every email. I would see everything. The role that Paul and I had were creative producers.
Can I ask you a question? Just rewind
I'm
a little bit.
sorry
No,
for
it's something you said earlier, and I'm because it's like at the inception of it. You talk about for the option, you got some local money. So do those people, were they more than one person? Do they stay on as producers with you?
They do. They become executive producers.
Yeah.
The way it is in film. In film, when you're a producer, you're closer to the making of the film than when you're an executive producer. Typically, the executive producers are the ones who are attached for some other reason. Mm-hmm. Either for namesake, or they've given money, or for some really other reason. But the producers are the ones in film. In television, it's reversed. Yeah. But in film, it's the ones who are really working really hard on it. But Paul and I were... we read all of the scripts that the guy was adapting it, and we did all of the, we gave all the notes. I mean, I was, literally, I was like Alice in Wonderland, naive about all this stuff. But I took my lead from Paula wherever we were. All right, so here's what happens. So that was what I say, 2011 or so. So Paula sets up shop in London, where we were filming it. We couldn't film it on the Isle of Guernsey where we wanted to, because we would have had to have our own invasion on Guernsey if we were going to do it. Too small of an island. So we were doing it. She goes over to London. She literally lived there for about 6 months, getting it all together. Everything was cast. The only thing that wasn't cast was the male lead, right? The love interest of Kate Winslet. It became very clear that nobody was making Kenneth Branagh very happy. Finally, at the end, he said, if I can't get someone to do it the way I want to do it, I'm out of here. And he left. And he basically left. And then he took on one of those Hunt for Red October films that he started doing afterwards. And then we couldn't get another director quick enough, so we lost Kate Winslet at the time, because it's all about timing as to how these things happen. She was on to something else. And then the world, studios all of a sudden overnight weren't making $35 million films anymore. And Fox 2000 pulled out, and here we are, right? And so we're in what's called turnaround, right? What turnaround means is all the money that Fox 2000 spent has to be accounted for if we're going to do it somewhere else. Somebody else had to basically buy it from Fox 2000, whatever they spent on it. So we wind our way, and the story ends happily, fortunately. We went through a whole bunch of different directors, and we had to leave those guys. So what we did is we hooked up with another company, which was Studio Canal out of Europe, which in many ways made sense because it was the British division in Europe. And because we did that, we also hooked up, they wanted a British production company to be attached, so they attached us with Blueprint. Now Blueprint has done some amazing stuff. They won an Academy Award for a film, and my mind is going blank. You know the film. It's about. It takes place in St. Louis. I think it was a kind of mystery with a wild detective. It'll come to me. But if you Google Blueprint, you'll see they've done great stuff. So we hooked up with Blueprint. We became partners with them in this project at this point. So we had another production company working with us. Paula was still taking the lead on it. So finally, we settled with Studio Canal, and we settled with the director, Mike Newell, it was just about his last film. He did 4 Weddings and a Funeral and a bunch of other stuff. And then we got Lily James to be starring in it. And then we had the male lead was a guy named Mikel Huisman, who's amazing, a Dutch actor. And this is what I love to say. The guy who gets jilted in this is, what's his name? Is Glenn Powell. Gets jilted in our film. And now he's it was one of his first films. And they were all really nice people, and we had a wonderful production. We made it in London. I went over to the set. I was going to go over to the opening, but then I had a death in the family, and I wasn't able to be there. But Paula did an amazing, amazing job, and so did the whole crew. Mike did an amazing job. And so what did I do? What I'm really proud about is I was involved after the shoot in the post-production. And so I went up to Toronto when we did post. I was in with sound. I was the only person along with Paula, but I was seeing it pretty much new so it was all with a heavy British accents. And I'm going, look, I can't understand what these guys are saying. Because particularly when their back was to you, I couldn't understand what they were saying. So in sound, it's amazing what they can do to create clarity with accents and other things. And I was also I made some suggestions that are in the film. I'll give you an example, and I was very proud of this suggestion. During the credit, we love I don't know how many of you have seen the film, but what's that? Yeah. So the film was, I think, a wonderful film, and you love the characters so much. And the ending, the ending stopped abruptly, and then you just moved to credits. So I thought, why don't we have a book club at the end during the credits where all you're hearing are the voices of the book club? And that was my suggestion that they took, and I was very proud of that. And it was just being part of this group was just so energizing for me, and watching how all this got put together. So that was not our first film, though. That was the first one I optioned, but it was the first one that we then got. That's not even the first one we got made. That was released, and we can talk more about that. That was released. So remember, I told you I optioned in 2011. It was released in 2019. It was released first in abroad, and then Netflix. I was really sad about this. The streamers were just starting to get started pretty bigly, and Netflix took it off. I was hoping there'd be a big theatrical release, because I thought it did. It was a huge bestseller in the States, even more so than in England, and I thought it would do really, really well at the box office. But Studio Canal decided to sell it around the world to Netflix. So it became one of Netflix's biggest films, and to this day, it's one of the most watched Netflix films that they have. So in between, if you have the films up there, in between I then optioned a book by a friend of mine called The Man Who Invented Christmas. And that we did, Paula and I did it as a Canadian-Irish production. Paula's husband is a Canadian producer as well. We brought him involved, which meant we could get all kinds of tax benefits from it as well. And that was a real kick, because we filmed it, Dan Stevens, Christopher Plummer, Jonathan Pryce. I was on set for about 2.5, 3 weeks on that one. And that was a blast. We were in Dublin as London, and we were filming right across from the Guinness factory. So we'd all go get drinks afterwards. And in fact, one of the main scenes is in an old Guinness warehouse. And I just love Dublin. And they have a big tax credit. So the Irish crews were amazing. It was like one film after another film after another film. And they would tell us stories about all the bad guys they were working with. I think, what's his name? The guy who's now in part of Doge, who's, the anti-Semitic guy. What's his name? Well, there's Elon Musk. No, but the Doge in Hollywood. He did The Passion. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson had just done a film, and there was a big fight on the set, and it was all that they were giving us all the gossip about what happened. It was really cool. But the crews are amazing there as well. And that was a great thing. I mean, Christopher Plummer, being in his presence, I got to have breakfast with him once, and his wife. He was in great shape. It was just a couple years before he died, and he was the consummate professional. It was cold. There are some cemetery scenes that we had to film late at night, and he was just worked. I stood next to the camera, watched him. He was like a real professional. Nicest guy in the world is Jonathan Pryce. When we had the wrap up, he stayed with the film. We had drinks together. He did it with the whole cast. Dan Stevens was a prince of a guy. I just saw Dan Stevens. Shocked me because I didn't recognize him at first. He was just in that De Niro TV series. I forget what it's called. Zero, something. He was amazing in that. These are really professional, great. A sideline on that, it was also during when Trump got elected. We were in Dublin, so there was the Women's March during the time we were shooting. The entire cast came dressed up in their costumes in 19th century England to go to the Women's March. They were holding signs at the Women's March. Because that film is about Charles Dickens and the writing of A Christmas Carol. And it's very cool. I could go on and on about each one of the films. I don't know if that's going to be helpful. But I could talk. Yeah, go ahead. I think you got to push the button.
Does this work now? Yes. You've answered a lot of the questions that I had, so that's great. But I feel like you guys probably have questions that you want answered, and it would be great to get some of those.
Let me just tell you two things real quick, so then you can ask in the context of this. The last film that it was released was called Let Him Go with Diane Lane and Kevin Costner. That was a studio film with Focus Features, directed by a guy named Tom Bazooka. The one right before that was All the Bright Places. That was done with Elle Fanning and Justice Jackson. And that was a Netflix film. So Netflix paid for it. We just finished a film that you don't see up there. It's called Flavia, based on Flavia de Luce. And this is a unique one. And there's a lot of questions about this, and this may be very relevant to you. This we independently financed. And that is a whole nother story. So with that context, feel free to ask whatever.
I mean, I think that would be really interesting in terms of like, why did you decide to independently finance that one? What was that? How did you get there?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about what a producer does. And, being a creative producer, what we do is we develop the project. We develop it to a point where we can then sell the project to either a studio, or a funder or something like that, right? I prefer working with studios because the money is there and you don't have to go scrounge it all together. We then are hired as producers to do the work we did on Guernsey and everything else. So we're a line item the way the director is a line item. We're a line item. We're not the kind of producers that are putting money into it. We do get some back end if there's ever back end. But we are actually, and that's the only way I would do this. I'm not here to invest in movies. I'm in here to have fun doing what I'm doing and having some creative juices that are used. So, what happened with Flavia is that it's a kind of tween movie. You don't know if it's for adults, for kids. So we thought it would be best if we developed it as far as we could. And then we started trying to sell it to various studios, and they weren't biting. But we really believed in the project. So we went the whole independent route, where what you do independently is you sell territories. So we sold England and Australia to Sky. And then we have a group that's selling them called Protagonist. And then we're using CAA as well to help sell these territories. We finished the film in November. It's in post right now. I should be getting a second pass, a director's cut, and we're going to make comments on that. And we may even have an audience development showing at some point. But we're thinking on this because America is such a big pie, and it's where we would get a lot of money from, to get the film absolutely done and then try to sell it here. We have a lot of confidence in it. Sell it to a user here.
Okay.
And just to give you an idea, that's about a 12, 13, $14 million film that we had to raise. There was a question there and then there.
Yeah. For example, when it doesn't go to theatrical, because when you make commitments to financiers and so on and so forth, you have to recoup. So when it goes straight to something like a streaming service like Netflix, is there a recoupment plan that goes on?
Yeah, Netflix was, I don't think they still do it this way, but Netflix was the most lucrative film experience that I had, dollar-wise. Because in those days, since there's no theatrical with Netflix, right? And I'm talking about All the Bright Places. What they do at the time is they took 15% of the budget and they put that aside, and everyone who was entitled to points were able to share in that. At that point, I think it was almost a $2 million sideline. So Elle Fanning had money, the writers had money, we had some percentage that we took out and all that. So you're not recouping from theatrical, you're recouping from Netflix directly. I don't know if they do. That was a number of years ago, and I'm not sure how they do it these days. Over there.
How do you spell Flavia?
It's Flav as in Victor, IA. I'll tell you, the little story behind that with Flavia is there's a guy named Alan Bradley who wrote 12 books. He's Canadian. And they're called the Flavia de Luce Mysteries. The very first one is called Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. And it features an 11-year-old who solves crimes because she knows everything there's to know about poison and chemistry. And so this one stars Toby Jones and Martin Freeman. It's directed by the same guy who directed our Christmas film, Barrett and Alluri, written by Susan Coyne, the same woman who adapted that one. And it is really charming. I've been seeing a lot of the early stuff. The 11-year-old is going to be a star. She's unbelievable.
So you are continuing books to...
Oh, everything we do is books to film. That's all we do. You want to choose? I forget who's who.
Hi. You said that you try and develop as much as you can before you go and shop it. So how much is that? Is that names attached?
I think it varies from project to project. Here, I'll give you an example. This was really cool. So Let Him Go, right? Let Him Go was done by a guy that we knew, Tom Bazooka. Remember I told you we had that $1.5 million writer who did Guernsey? Tom Bazooka was a writer-director who did The Family Stone. So he decided, after we worked with him, he loved this book, Let Him Go, which I had read after. He said, Mitchell and Paula, there's a great book called Let Him Go. I want to adapt it. He adapted it on spec. He did it all by himself. So we went to Focus. Paula knew the guys who ran Focus. We went to Focus with Tom as director, a script already made, and we just went with them there. So we didn't have to develop much. It came to us. They bought it right based on the script and based on Tom. And then we were able to get Kevin Costner, which was a huge get, and Diane Lane, and the next thing, and so that whole circle was about 1.5 years. And the next thing I know, we're in Calgary filming it. And I think it's one of the best films we've done. Unfortunately, it came out during the pandemic. I like to say that we won the weekend we were released, but it did a $4 million weekend, which should have been a $40 million weekend. But it literally was right during the pandemic. It's one of a few films that came out during the pandemic.
Over here. Yep. That's you.
Hi, I'm interested in the earlier part of this process. Like you mentioned just a while ago, you got to read this book, so-and-so, and I'm wondering, I'm looking for more of a writer's perspective. Do you just have a network of literary agents that you read all the books that come out, that they have coming out? Or do you just sit at your coffee table and read books that you like and then decide that you want to...
Okay, so it works on a couple levels. So for most people who are not in my world, which is the literary world, remember, I'm surrounded by books. I see them all the time. And I have older books that I've always loved. But for most people, if you're not sure, if you're not in this literary world, there are, as I said before, book-to-film agents. And what their job is, they go and they even do it to us. They'll say, okay, we have these new books coming out. Take a look. This is a great one. They're trying to sell books to companies like mine or to writers to adapt. The other way of doing it is to fall in love with a book that you love and then find out whether there is already an option on it. You can. There are ways. I think it's called. I'll find out the name. But there's a studio system. I think it's called Studio System, and you find out, or Studio something, and you can find out whether something is already optioned or not. But it really has to start with you knowing. Now, what's happened now and the way it's changed is, as I said before, Reese Witherspoon, all these stars have their own production companies. So all these stars are now looking for books in order to option. So it's gotten very, very, very competitive. Now the cool thing for me is that a book-to-film agent is going to try to sell something, and I know the bullshit they're trying to sell, right? Oh, this is the biggest book that people are talking about. And I go, no, it's not. I mean, I'm in that world. I know it's not. Or her last book was a big success. No, it wasn't. But there are some amazing book to film agents who are doing great work, and then they're getting a lot of these people are getting the books before I even have a chance to take a look at them. So a lot of these big book deals are happening before the book is even out in the marketplace, before it's even published. So I'm not looking for those particular ones. I'm not looking to pay $1 million option. I'm looking for those wonderful books that tell wonderful stories that I know my customers respond to, but it may not be the biggest book in the world, or that I respond to as well. Does that answer the question a little bit?
In the back.
Hello, Mr. Kaplan. I am a young filmmaker that's currently based in Miami, and I sort of want to get an idea of what kind of advice you may have to people who are looking to break into the industry in terms of either a producer or a writer, and if you have any advice for that.
It's hard. I mean, I realized that I didn't exactly break in. I mean, I broke in at a level that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to break in on. So I realized how privileged I was because of that. But I think the way I did it is probably very similar. You have to fall in love with a project that you want. If you're a producer, you fall in love with a project, and then you network as much. You have to basically market it and sell it any way that you can. There are, if you were a writer, now as a screenwriter, there are all kinds of things that I've learned about. Sundance has a film lab that you can do. There's all kinds of possibilities as a writer for you to get involved in that. If you want to produce, the best way of doing it if you're young and you have patience is to work with a producer, is to work with the kind of producer that you want to work with and do stuff. You don't have to be at CAA and be in the mailroom. You could actually, and it may be that you may have to invest some money in it by interning, and maybe not getting a job right away, but finding yourself getting a job. I'm not going to lie, though, it seems like a really tough time right now. I mean, we had 2 people working for us with Paula and I, and we had to let them go because, we no longer have the luxury of that, and so it's getting more and more and more difficult. Remember I said there were $35 million films that were being made? Now the kind of films that we're making, it's probably in the $12 to $19 million range. And if you imagine that how much a Kevin Costner cost, or what some of these guys cost, so it gets more and more shrunk in terms of what a producer would actually make on a particular film. So like anything, and I tell writers this as well, fall in love with something good. Have something that's undeniable. I know that doesn't help, but do something really undeniable. Go to things like this, meet filmmakers, meet as many people as you can, and look into some of those programs that are out there.
Mitchell, I'm looking up here and I'm thinking about the studio system and making films. And we've had about 100 years of the studio system in California. And when I look at Netflix, for example, every time I open Netflix, there's just a whole new array of things to view. And you said that's where really the lucrative money is now, is that correct?
Well, it was. I don't know if it still is in the same way.
All right. My question would be is, do you see that as a direction that film entertainment is going rather than the studio system in California?
Well, Netflix would be thought of as a studio, actually, these days. But I believe in democracy. I believe in democracy as the arts go. And I believe in the more you can have a decentralized way of being able to express yourself, the better you are. In the book business, that means smaller presses coming out with stuff, independent presses. I loved it when more indie films were being funded and being allowed to be made. I think it creates a more democratic and a more fertile creative world, as opposed to just a few studios doing it. But the vagaries of the business is that streamers like Netflix and Amazon and others have been dominant over the years. But there are a lot of good indie films that get made. But what's depressing, and when you look, and the Coral Gables Cinema is a perfect place where these come. And what I would love all of you to do is make sure, if you're not, become members of the cinema. And if you want, we have this lovely woman back here, Marlon, who is the head of the board of directors of the cinema.
And I just want to say, we are thriving. As an independent 141-seat theater, on a given Saturday, we can show 5 different films and just get them in and out. But, a lot of things are selling out. We are adding chairs to programs that I have no idea what they are. They're at 11 o'clock at night. But we're just multiple different age groups and audiences.
I think cinema is thriving. The problem is how do filmmakers support themselves? How's money being made? What happened? I don't know why it's got an addiction. I go to Box Office Mojo a lot to see how films are doing. And when you see even the biggest name films that I love that are showing here, and you go, oh my God, you mean the total net receipts are $2 million or $1.5 million. And most of that has happened in this cinema right here. I worry personally about what's going to happen with the indie market. But that's why these kinds of theaters need to be supported, because as long as these theaters are vibrant and working, then there will be an indie market. You're finding, The Brutalist, they say, was made for like $9 million, which is a small amount generally, and it took them forever. That's why I think it fell apart at the end. They didn't quite know how to finish it, or they didn't have the money to finish it in some way. But you can make really good films for a lot less these days. But the question is, how are you going to get distribution? Who's going to see it? Where are they going to see it? How are you going to earn a little something from all your sweat and work into it? So, I don't know enough to be able to have an opinion really about it. But all I know is, to answer your question directly, a healthy market means there should be a lot of independent ways of making a movie. It shouldn't just rely on 5 or 6 different studios to fund most of the movies that we have coming out.
All right. Hey guys, hi Mitchell. Thank you for taking the time and speaking with us and sharing your experience, your expertise. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about approach and offers to actors, like in the beginning of productions. If you think pay-your-play deals, money up front, kind of percentages when you're making the offer compared to the whole of their salaries, things like that. What you experience works to get them attached.
Yeah. Okay. Typically, there are a lot of different ways of doing it, but you typically are working through their agents. Typically, that's the way it is. So, pay or play, we haven't really had to do that too much. So because of that, it's a lot of white knuckling, because if you're not doing pay or play, if weather changes your shooting schedule, or you may lose the actor that you had. For instance, this Flavia one, Martin Freeman, it was 3 years in the making, but Martin Freeman attached himself almost from the beginning, and he stayed with it for all those 3 years because he really wanted to do it. So there isn't one rule, but the process is, we typically work with casting agents as well. So the casting agents really know all the agents that are out there, and we basically we make lists of those people we want for our films, and we start ticking them off one after another. The funny thing about Guernsey was, we had Jane Chastain at one point. We had, we went through, but it's so funny because when you have another funder funding it, they go, oh, Jane Chastain, she's not a $19 million film. She's a $12 million. I mean, it's bizarre. And you're doing it years before the film comes out. And so by the time the film comes out, they're a $30 million star, You know, so it's a little frustrating going through all that stuff when you're not producing it yourself, and when you do have funders that you're answering to. But basically, it's agents, and then you just negotiate a deal. What's that? Casting agents, then their agents. And you could, if you don't have a casting agent, you can go directly to their agent as well. What we're doing now, we have a book called Go as a River that we're in the process of developing. So we want to get a writer-director involved, or just a writer, because we did raise some money to be able to just do a script. And so what we do is, in this case, we just send the book, and they have to love the book and want to live with that book for a little while.
Cool, thanks.
My question is sort of more along the line, especially for starting creators, is what do you do when you experience maybe like a major setback? And I'll give an example, which is I've been developing an original script for a long time. It got a lot of decent attention, and even got a grant to develop it.
Is it original script?
It's an original script. It got a grant to develop the short. Now, I love the script. That's its strength. That's what got it attention. But when giving the opportunity to jump on directing and producing the short with a grant, I feel like the final product is very weak. I'm not happy with it. Now I take that positively as like a learning experience, but I don't want to show it to anybody because I feel like it's not going to develop my story. It's going to ruin it. But it's like
Well, is it salvageable?
It is. I mean,
could you recut it? Does it need a little extra shooting? I mean, are you able to make it work somehow?
I've been experimenting with recuts. I was editing it for a long time. It's just when it's the first experience. So I've been trying to parlay that experience in I have professional experience. Actually, you know Roy Wagner.
Yeah.
He shot it.
Wow.
So he was one of our collaborators.
Well, I would say I'm going to make an analogy to authors who write books. Here's an example. There's a woman who works for me right now. She's worked for me for a couple of years. She's written 4 novels that she put in her drawer. The 5th novel she sent out, a major agent took it, and now they're looking to be able to publish it with a major push. So don't feel bad. See it as don't put something out that you're not happy about. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I mean, I wouldn't put something that you're not happy or proud about.
Now, can I, because I come from a advertising photography background. That's what I've done most of my life. Now I do have a full-time job, so I'm sort of, getting my feet wet into this film because I love it. But in my experience, I've learned that we creators are our worst enemies. We're always like doubting our work, especially at the beginning, especially when you're starting at something. You're like, is it good? Is it, oh my God. And then you see some other work, and you're like, that's awesome. And you're thinking, I'm done, man. But what I would suggest is find people that you really trust, friends, colleagues that you really trust, and ask for a God honest opinion. And you might be surprised. Either way, you might be surprised on the bad side or on the good side, and then you can feed off of that and then try to adjust.
I think that's a great. Have you focus grouped it at all?
Yeah, and I get mixed reviews basically.
Oh.
And asking for honest answers. And it's like, people who I know who are professionals, like we're talking have sold 30 scripts, live in the valley, right? Never developed. It's like, I don't like it. I'm like, that's because you're a professional writer. You don't like my God honest work, And then some people who I think are like, they're not experienced, but they're nerds, that I show it to them and they're like, this is awesome and it's tender and it's funny. And I'm like, well, thank you, because that's what I was going for. But, it's mixed like that.
It sounds like you're stuck. Maybe you should just get it out there and just get it out there and see what the world thinks.
Yeah. All right.
Do you look for executive producers for your company?
You mean, do we look for people to be involved, to invest in that? Yes, we do. We can talk after if you want. We do, actually. In fact, we just brought on somebody who is funding the script for this next book I'm telling you about, Go as a River, and they love the book. Oh, did you love? Yeah. So what happened with that book? It was very similar to Guernsey. It's a book called Go as a River. I was given the book by friends of mine who published it, called Spiegel and Grau, and I read it. And I went to college in Colorado, so the Colorado aspect of it really appealed to me. And it's an amazing story about a woman, sort of in a very hardscrabble youth, and how she wanders through her life in western Colorado. First-time author in her 50s, a woman named Shelley Reed. She's a seventh generation, a woman from Crested Butte, Colorado. She taught English, really, really good writer. And I said, we're going to make a movie out of this. And so we optioned it from Spiegel and Grau and from her. This case was interesting. Spiegel and Grau, the publisher, came on as an executive producer as well. So they're an executive producer. Then there were some customers of mine and people who knew Spiegel and Grau who loved the book. They live in Miami. And we decided that a strategy would be, because it's you can imagine, it's a very hard book to adapt. There's a million different stories. There's a parallel story. So we thought, it might be better to get a screenplay, to get something written, so that we can then try to attach a director or a star in terms of that. So if you really loved it, we should talk more about it, because there are a lot of opportunities for that.
I'd love to hear more about what that pitch meeting with the studio sounds and looks like when you don't have a script and all you're trying to pitch to them is that book or like that story. Are you going off of like your passion for it and your instincts, or are you also trying to be like, it sold this many copies?
Yeah, pitching, we also got involved in television as well. Pitching in TV is much more intense than pitching a film. Typically, when you're pitching a film, you're sending what you have, and they're preparing, they're thinking about it. There's no pitch room for a film as much. So it's a little less stressful. So what we're doing is we create a sheet. I could have brought one, but for instance, Go as a River, I'll give you a perfect example. Go as a River was never a bestseller in the United States, but it sold 800,000 copies so far around the world. It was a bestseller in Denmark, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Britain. And so, you have to let people know just how popular the book actually was worldwide. So we send a sheet out explaining the book, all the reviews, any awards that it's won, all of that. So we're basically selling the book in order to get them interested enough to read the book, at that point. Some people don't read books. Some people, when Netflix took Guernsey, it was after the British release. We had an opening in LA for the Netflix release of Guernsey. They had no idea it was a book. They were like, I kept having, I brought the author around. Some people in Hollywood just don't read books. So having a script is very helpful. So as much of your development, if you can hook up with a director, writer, or a writer, and if it's an unknown book, that may be very helpful to be able to do that. Does that help you? With television, the pitching is really different. With TV, you have a date, you go in, you've probably done it, and you go in, and it's like a performance you're doing, and you schedule it out as to what every person's going to do, and then they don't give you an answer. They seem, and in these days, it's Zoom, which is really bad. So you're looking at them, and they're looking bored, or they're doing this. You're trying to read the room. I couldn't stand it. I hate TV. I hate producing TV. I would rather do film, I think.
We have one more question.
I did, yes. You just mentioned the author a while ago, and when you fall in love with the story, but what is the role of the author in all of this? I think a lot of us who watch movies are like, who let that happen? Like whatever.
Well, a lot of authors, you'll hear from a lot of authors, I just collect the check, and they don't want anything to do with it. Other authors are a little bit more involved. Larry Watson in Let Him Go wasn't that involved. He came to the set. On Guernsey, they weren't that really involved. In All the Bright Places, the author was one of the screenwriters as well, so she was very involved. We have a responsibility to the author, so Shelley, for Go as a River, I'm very close to. And given the role that I am and who I am, I want to make sure the authors are really happy with what we do. And if we're going to make a change, we ask the author if, we let them know. But it's really depends on what their relationship really is. But I want to make, and I can honestly say that each one of the adaptations we've had, the authors have been thrilled by the adaptation.
Jen, are we at time? Yeah. Thank you so much, Mitch. My mic doesn't work anymore, so I'll just. It's okay. I can speak loudly. Thank you so much for everything. I think I've been going to the movies a lot more than I feel like we used to, and there's something in Guernsey about how there's this moment of people are really just starving for community and for being in a place together and actually sharing that and the human experience. So I think there's a real, despite everything that is happening, and probably because of it, there's a real moment for that, and we probably shouldn't lose sight of that.
The movies, people ask me, how do you select a book? Why do you select this book over another book? I'm not looking for how many sell, and I'm not looking for the most commercial book. I'm looking for books that really touch people, that tell stories. It's what I like to read. Even though I love watching all these sort of experimental films and all that, those films I like, those are not necessarily the films I want to make in that sense. I really want films that speak to us in some particular way. And I think each one of the films we've made so far does do that. Probably the most commercial, but it's fun, is the Flavia film that we just made. It's really just a mystery, like an Agatha Christie mystery. But it's a great thing. I feel very blessed to be able to be doing this. And I do realize the privilege that I have in terms of where I've come into this. And all of you out there who are starting or you're doing it, it is a tough road to go down, but I'm so glad that groups like this exist because you can all support one another, you can talk to one another, and let's just all hope that there's a tax credit that Florida gives to Miami so we could all be making movies here. It's really hard. She just told me that Bad Monkey, the second season, is moving out of Miami, which is a drag. To think of Carl Hyacint's films being made somewhere else. Dexter, which was a Miami-based, my son's one of his favorite TV programs, made out of Miami as well. Anyway, thank you all.
Thank you.